Get this picture of a barbarian horde out of your head. The Roman legion was a complex, organized machine of flesh and steel. Every single soldier was like an interchangeable part, and the whole unit was designed for one thing: maximum efficiency in the brutal math of warfare.
So that's the big question, right? That's what we're going to answer today. We're going to trace its journey through 4 really distinct phases, from, a simple prototype to the perfected engine of conquest, and then finally to its last-ditch overhaul when it was facing total collapse.
Every great invention has to start with a prototype, and the Roman army was no different. Its earliest version was basically a borrowed design. They were heavily influenced by their more advanced neighbors, kind of like they were copying their homework.
It's honestly incredible to think about how humble Rome's beginnings were. The very first Roman army, it wasn't a professional force at all. It was a part-time militia. We're talking farmers and tradesmen who would literally just put down their tools when the call to war went out. And get this, service was based on wealth. You only got to fight if you could afford your own weapons and armor. It was a system they copied straight from the Etruscans and the Greeks.
And the main tactic they borrowed was the phalanx. Now this was a brutal, straightforward formation. You just lock your shields together, point your spears forward, and you become a human steamroller. It's incredibly powerful, but it's also super rigid. And the Romans, they were about to find out its limits and engineer something much, much better.
And that brings us to Rome's first major upgrade. This is where they take that rigid phalanx and they completely re-engineer it. They turn it into this flexible, adaptable fighting force that could work on any kind of terrain. This was the Manipular Legion. This was the Army's version 2.0.
The real genius of this system was its 3 distinct lines, all organized by age and experience. So you had the young guys, the hostati, engage first. When they started to get tired, they could actually fall back through gaps in the line behind them, and the fresh Principes would take over. This solved the phalanx's biggest weakness: it just had no stamina. On the rough, hilly terrain of Italy, this checkerboard formation could move in ways a phalanx just couldn't, making the Legion a relentless grinder that could outlast pretty much any opponent.
And of course, this new formation came with a totally new set of tools. That long, unwieldy spear from the phalanx, gone. It was replaced with 2 absolutely devastating new weapons. First, the short, stabbing sword called the gladius, designed for just brutal, up-close and personal work. And second, the pilum, a heavy javelin that was a true masterpiece of military engineering.
I mean, this is just brilliant. The pilum wasn't just designed to kill an enemy. It was designed to completely neutralize their defense. A whole volley of these things would slam into the enemy's shield wall. The soft iron shank would bend on impact, which made the shield a useless, heavy burden, and it stripped the enemy of their protection, just moments before the legionaries charged in with their swords. Just genius.
But the Roman army was still just a citizen militia. That all changed around 107 BCE with the reforms of a general named Gaius Marius. Now this is the moment the Roman war machine was truly perfected. This is when it became a professional, world-conquering engine. Okay, so the crucial point here is this. Marius's reforms completely changed who a Roman soldier was. He got rid of the property requirement, which opened up the legions to the poor and the landless. The state now provided standardized equipment for everyone, and service became a full-time 25-year career. Rome suddenly had a permanent professional army, ready to be sent anywhere, anytime. Now the trade-off for this new career was that Marius got rid of these slow, clunky baggage trains. From now on, each legionary had to carry everything himself. They were nicknamed Marius's mules, and while I'm sure their backs ached, their ability to march fast and build a fortified camp every single night gave them an incredible strategic advantage. And just look at that number, 40 kilograms. That's about 90 pounds, and that's on top of their armor and weapons. It just shows you the incredible endurance and discipline of these new professional legionaries. These guys weren't just soldiers, they were soldier builders who literally conquered the world on their own 2 feet.
The internal structure was also brilliantly standardized. Everything was built around the 8-man contubernium. That was the tent group. They were literally a family on the march. 10 of those made up a century led by the legendary centurion. 6 centuries formed a cohort, and 10 cohorts made up the mighty legion of almost 5,000 men. It was a perfectly modular system, totally efficient and scalable for any conflict.
But, and this is a huge but, the Marian reforms had a profound and really dangerous side effect. Because the soldiers were now career professionals, they depended on their general for everything: victory, spoils, their retirement pension. And so their loyalty shifted. It no longer belonged to some abstract idea of the state back in Rome. It belonged to the man who led them in battle. This new reality created legions with these fierce personal loyalties. Take the 10th Legion, for example, Julius Caesar's absolute favorite. He trusted them completely, and they followed him through the entire conquest of Gaul and the invasion of Britain. Their loyalty was to him, not to the Senate.
And then, of course, there was the 13th. When the Senate ordered Caesar to disband his army, he stood at the Rubicon River, the border of Italy. To cross it with an army was an act of treason. But when he gave the order, the 13th didn't even hesitate. Their loyalty to Caesar plunged the Republic into civil war and ultimately paved the way for the emperors.
Now, for centuries, this perfected Marian legion just dominated. But empires don't last forever, do they? By the 3rd century CE, the Roman Empire was facing a totally new reality. Constant threats all along a massive frontier. The war machine had to be broken down and completely overhauled just to survive.
See, the whole strategic problem had changed. Rome was no longer on the offensive. It was playing defense. And those massive 5,000-man legions, yeah, they were powerful, but they were way too slow to respond to the constant hit-and-run raids by barbarian tribes all along the Rhine and Danube rivers. They just weren't the right tool for the job anymore.
So what did they do? They broke the machine in two. On the frontiers, they stationed the limitani, the bordermen. These guys were soldier farmers who acted as a permanent garrison. Think of them as a kind of speed bump. Then, behind them, held in reserve, were the comitatenses, a highly mobile, elite field army. These were the firefighters, ready to race to any breach in the border and put out the threat.
And the legionaries' gear changed to meet these new threats. That iconic rectangular shield was replaced by a simpler oval one, and the gladius gave way to the longer spatha sword. This was a direct response to new enemies fighting from horseback. To counter them, that classic Roman heavy infantryman was slowly phased out in favor of more flexible troops and a much, much greater reliance on Roman cavalry.
So, when you look back at the whole 1,000-year history, the story of the Roman army is just one of constant adaptation. It went from a borrowed Greek phalanx to the flexible manipular system to the perfected professional legion of Marius, and finally to the defensive border armies of the late empire. Each version was a direct answer to the challenges of its time.
But even this final, adapted version of the army couldn't last forever. And this quote, man, it just captures the tragic end perfectly. The machine itself was still effective, but the empire was crumbling from the inside, facing economic crises, political chaos, and just endless wars that drained its manpower.
And that's really the final thought to leave you with. The Roman army proves that military might alone is never enough to sustain an empire. Eventually, the world changes, the threats multiply, and even the most perfected machine will break down if you can no longer find the men to serve as its parts.